Okay, I'm just going to record my video response to this because that'll just be much easier for me to deal with. And just read it and live react. In contrast to John's, yours is a very charitable reading, on the verge of distorting her distortion to fit a narrative. I'm sympathetic to your defense in general, but I don't think it's accurate in this case. It's not about common mistypes, like the E Institute points out, for example, but about countertype and lookalikes to the point of taking on a completely different type. These descriptions of her are the basis of a plethora of confusions and nonsense that roams the Enneagram like a zombie. It has no real value and only serves people to escape the weight of their fixations by claiming a countertype escape pod that has little grounding in actual sensible theory. Additionally, there is no rhyme or reason to it, neither from the type signatures themselves nor from the symbol, and I know you're a fan of that. How would you independently get to her conclusions? Ain't that typical 5 territory? Why not just apply Occam's razor? If someone looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck. So, first, I haven't read any of her content. I've just absorbed it all by osmosis into intuition, so should know that at least. Distorting her distortions. I'll look up after I finish recording this video. I will go find what she says. In, as far as I'm aware, her only book, the 27 Paths to whatever. About these fives, and see. Actually, I may do it on. I'll actually pause the video and see. But whether there's sensibility or grounding to a countertype theory is not self-evident. I mean, I agree countertype is shit, but it's not like it's irrational to suppose countertype might have some merit. And even the accountings of it given might be themselves meritorious. So I would be playing devil's advocate here because I wouldn't agree with the conclusion in service to which I would be forming the argument, but from the type signatures themselves, nor from the symbol. So I don't agree. For one, I think I'll give you like the fastest version, and I won't expect you to get it unless it just like surprises me when it comes out of my mouth how obvious it is. But and I've thought a lot about this because I've thought, okay, what if I am just somebody with the right type of intelligence and intuition, and I get marooned on a desert island, and I know everything a normal human knows, but except for I know nothing about the Enneagram, and there is this like random ass metal panel in the woods with the Enneagram inscribed on it, such that I have now like years and years to meditate on just this symbol and to puzzle it out. Because I can tell you, if I knew nothing about the Enneagram and I came upon it with no numbers, I would likely die if marooned. But if I didn't die, if I somehow managed to do a what the fuck is that movie with Wilson? Fuck. Castaway. If I figured out how to live sustainably on such an island, and I had just basically just that symbol to meditate on and think about, with some, I think there's a real possibility that I would come to these same conclusions, that I would originate the system. Tons of caveats to that, but suffice it to say that instincts are a discriminable entity in a sort of natural way. I don't think that it's a far cry to go from Enneagram with instincts to without instincts to Enneagram with instincts. So let's just assume then, okay, you have the instincts, you have 3 of them. Let's make a cycle of them. The Enneagram is a circle. It suggests cyclical structures. Okay, now you have 6 stackings. Do they have any order? Let's say they have an ordering of synflow and contraflow. Okay, there are 6 stackings and 3 instincts that comprise them. That compose them? I'm actually not sure. That permute to form them. And so that's a 9. That's 9. Maybe the 9 corresponds with the Enneagram. And I think it does. I think that the synflow types correspond to the heart types. I think the contraflow types correspond to the head types. I think that sexual, social, survival, instinctual stacking corresponds to 7. I think that a sexual, social, survival, instinctual stacking is a more naturally social structure than a 5 is naturally, despite them both being head types. And so I would say that one way that would support it, and it wouldn't independently get to conclusions, but would justify this specific pairing, this assertion in a vacuum, or would offer evidence for it, is this way. And when you are, say, a social sexual 5, perhaps sexual social 5, I don't know any sexual social 5s, I think. So I'm not exquisitely in touch with how that manifests, but I am exquisitely in touch with how social sexual 5 manifests, as I am one. And the natural expansive orientation can mimic gluttony. It isn't gluttony, it isn't 7, but there is such a need still, decades later, much less when she was writing, when Naranjo was writing, there is now, even now, for any writer now making this mistake, it is still forgivable, because the context is such that one needs to be quite a phenomenal and or correctly connected. One either needs a gifted mentor to break through, or needs to be quite themselves naturally gifted in some profound ways, I would think, in order to outmaneuver this like cultural pressure to conflate these. And so when you have somebody who is, let's say, not TI ego, which I've only vibe typed Beatrice Chestnut when I met her. I didn't think too hard about her cognitive type, but it would not surprise me at all to learn that she was TEFI valuing. And so she is just cognitively not going to see an issue with the countertypes being asymmetrical. Like, that's not really a consideration that happens. I don't remember you, Franz. I don't know John's cog type. I know he types NIFE. But I find it plausible, like pretty readily plausible, that both of you would be TI valuing and so would be naturally more sensitive, as I am, to the asymmetry and to the recognition of this like ad hoc reasoning. But that's not a problem for TE, and it's not a problem for, consequently, half the population, approximately. And you can say, oh, well, TI is actually the correct lens, and, you know, even the TE egos are not just different but equal, but are objectively wrong in some, like, intersubjective sense. And sure, you could. I could do that right now, but that's not the point. The point is that it's not so charitable that it requires distortion to distortion unto delusion. It is the reason why I'm even here, despite agreeing with John in some fundamental way, is that I have the harshest criticisms for those with whom I agree the most. And it's because when, in my opinion, one acts to defend position X with fallacious reasoning, one brings a sort of shame and untrustworthiness. It erodes the integrity and thus the rhetorical power that it can command. And so I don't want to let people arguing my position make it look bad. Argue for countertype as shittily as you want. I don't really care. But you are connected as someone who is against countertype to the most power. You have the highest power ceiling. Don't do a disservice to it by serving as a negative effectual marker for the public. And so if you're going to be with someone who doesn't see a problem with the symmetry, then you can instead go off just the fact that, one singular type maybe is like an inversion. Maybe it's goes against the grain in some way. That sounds rational to me. That sounds like a reasonable intuition, a reasonable hypothesis that would possess one to investigate it, to attempt to falsify it, to shore it up with experience. And so B, or Naranjo, whatever, brings this to his lived experience. I forgot you said, Naranjo came up with countertype, and Naranjo was TI valuing, so he's got no excuses. He's actually any TI, in my opinion. Not coincidentally. It wouldn't surprise me if 7 for Naranjo, who is himself a social sexual 5, wasn't a common typing. I don't know if it is. I don't know how widely he's regarded as a 5. But it wouldn't surprise me at all to learn that there were a bunch of people on Personality Database who type him 7 core. But in any case, how it came to be isn't of super importance, I don't think. I don't think it's such a disaster of structure like some of these radially asymmetrical triads that people try to make. Those just get dismissed on self-evidentiarily ugliness. But I don't think the countertype is that ugly. You have to be a pretty particular thinker to be sensitive to it, in my opinion. And when you're in the Wild West, as Naranjo was, I don't really see a problem with speaking this way. I just don't. I think that even if I did, other people won't. And that other people won't is the crux. To speak perfectly is to remain silent. There is no linguistic perfection available to you. This is a truth embedded in the Enneagram. You want to critique alone. We don't speak to speak the truth. We speak to communicate the truth. And the truth is not communicated by speaking exact truth. The truth is communicated by speaking in a way that you believe is most syntonic to your audience being signaled to intuit the truth themselves. The words are just pointers. We point in a way that helps someone take the next step up, to grab the next higher tree branch, climbing into the sky of enlightenment. And we don't help them by speaking by being too critical on what is a pretty esoteric subject. Now, I agree with the criticisms, and I agree with the justification of offering them ultimately, but this needs to take place in a pretty intellectually rigorous space, not in Enneagram types in relationships or whatever post this is, Enneagram 5, even this is not an intellectually rigorous group. You surely are aware of that. It's not like everyone in here is 5 fixed or TI ego or anything like that. And so you then become akin to and thus evaluable under the same like rubric of success as some sort of street preacher. You are working when you comment to serve the broader understanding or to serve a more powerfully expansive presence of the Enneagram in the world, let's say, because you may choose to give a really deep understanding to one person than a shallow understanding to 10 people. I would still say you are still serving the magnitude of this Enneagram that we are all here in service to, because we are possessed by its power. We are convinced of its transformative potential, and we want to share that. So you can't go and give someone encouragement in a language they don't speak. You have to meet them where they are. And saying that a sexual 5 looks like a sexual 5 is not meeting people where they are. A sexual 5 doesn't always look like a sexual 5. You get this disease when you learn about the Enneagram for a long time, where what has become obvious to you is then thrown in the face of everyone else who is new and ignorant, as if it were obvious to them, or it should be obvious to them. It wasn't obvious to you when you first started. Guaranteed. It's not obvious to John still. He still thinks he's a 458 or whatever. Like, the hubris is a bit much, and is just willfully delusional and attached to some fragile ideal. There's probably more I had to say, but it's already 17 minutes long. All right, you can stop watching now. I'm just going to read the Social 5 chapter in Chestnut here and live react to that because I want to. The Social 5 Totem. For Social 5s, the passion of avarice is connected to knowledge. These 5s don't need the nourishment relationships provide because their passion for knowledge somehow compensates for what they might get from direct human contact. It's as if they have an intuition that they can find everything they need through the mind. Needs, for people and for emotional sustenance, get displaced into a thirst for knowledge. The name given to this subtype is totem, which communicates their need for super ideals, or the need to relate to people who share their intellectual values, interests, and ideals. The image of a totem suggests both height and a character that is constructed, like an object, rather than a human being. These 5s do not relate to regular people in everyday life. They relate to easily idealized experts who share their ideals, to people who display what they see as outstanding characteristics based on shared values and knowledge, and who they can keep at a certain distance. One Social 5 I know says he collects people who share his interests and values. That's For Social 5s, then, avarice gets acted out through a greedy search for the ultimate ideals that will provide a sense of meaning by connecting them to something special, thereby elevating their life. A greedy search. That sounds pretty gluttonous. Social 5's passion is the need for the essential, the sublime, or the extraordinary instead of what is here and now. Sounds gluttonous. In line with this need for relationships based on shared ideals, Social 5s have a tendency to look upward, toward higher values. According to Naranjo, they look toward the stars and care little for life down on Earth. In contrast to Sexual 5s, who are iconoclasts, Social 5s are admiring people. Individuals who admire others that express their ideals in extraordinary ways. In looking for and adhering to super values, they can be disdainful of ordinary life and ordinary people. The life of the mind feels more compelling, and the people at a distance who represent the extraordinary seem more seductive and interesting to them than the people they meet in everyday life. Social 5s are looking for the ultimate meaning in life, motivated by an underlying, potentially unconscious, sense that things are meaningless unless the ultimate meaning is found. This 5's drive to find the extraordinary underscores a polarity they may perceive between extraordinariness and meaninglessness. Yes, but it's not extraordinariness. Actually, it kind of is, I suppose, just in the sense of novelty is a format of aliveness that keeps the defensive posture of the head going. There needs to be an inner font of emergence to keep the social five from feeling meaningless. I'm not sure that would be particular to social five, though. They look for meaning to avoid a fearful sense that the world is meaningless, but in their search for meaning, they orient themselves so much toward finding the quintessence of life, the extraordinary, that they may become disinterested in everyday life. They see a gap between the ideal and everyday life, and they burn in the longing for the ultimate meaning. For this five, motivated by the social instinct in the service of avarice, the common, ordinary self does not have enough value to satisfy their drive for meaning. Okay. It's more of a sense of, in order to compel my inclusion into the social, I must bring some special functionality that is indispensable. That's my experience of it anyway. For this five, motivated by the social instinct in the service of avarice, the common, ordinary self does not have enough value to satisfy their drive for meaning. In their search for meaning, these fives can become spiritual or idealistic in a way that is actually counter to real spiritual attainment, because it bypasses compassion and empathy on the practical level of how people connect to each other in ordinary life. This tendency is the prototype of what is sometimes called a spiritual bypass, in which a person looks for and devotes himself to the higher ideal or valued system of knowledge as a way of avoiding doing the emotional and psychological work he would need to do to grow and develop. They may believe they are transcending their ego, but their adherence to their spiritual values or practice is their way of escaping from their everyday emotional reality into a higher intellectual system that they have idealized. Any type can spiritually bypass, but the social five is the prototype who employs this of someone who employs this as a defensive strategy. Debatable. Social fives prefer not to feel. They can be mysterious and inaccessible, or fun and intellectually engaging. Sounds 7-y. I forgot I was looking for 7. This disdainful for ordinary people, always trying to go away towards something special, thereby elevating their life, blah, blah, blah. Sounds like a lot of gluttony stuff. Sounds like way social 7 can become 7. It is moving out into the world as a social type. It is primarily concerned with its relationship to people, which requires relating to people. Even I, who get off on being rejected by people, need to approach people to be rejected. And so withdrawing can look like engaging. They may hide out in the pose of an expert, and they tend to have a sense of omnipotence through the exercise of their intellect. These fives may imagine that they are superior to others because of their higher values and ideals. Although they would never intentionally show it, they seek recognition and prestige. They want to be someone important, and they often seek to fulfill this desire by allying themselves with people they admire. Social fives can look like type 7s in that they can be fairly outgoing and display a great deal of excitement about interesting ideas and people. The social five is typically more out there than other fives, assertive, in the sense of being more social and able to engage. Social fives differ from 7s, however, in that they are more reserved, less self-interested, and less emotional than 7s. God damn it. The sexual 5 is the counter type, and I just read social 5, thinking that was it, but whatever. Social 5 looks like 7. Did I miss anything else? You need to try to search very charitable reading. Don't think it's accurate. It's not about common mistypes. Wait, where did... Oh, social fives can look like type 7s in that they can be fairly outgoing and display a great deal of excitement about interesting ideas and people. Yes, that sounds authentically 7-ish. I mean, it's a shallow parallel. But I mean, in what way is social 5 not capable of being markedly capable of being fairly outgoing and displaying a great deal of excitement about interesting ideas and people? In what way is that not true of social 5? Obviously it is. In what way is that not true of 7? Obviously it is. And so your assertion is just that even if the, like iron or steel manning it, is to say that even if this is an authentic parallel, it is such a malformed parallel that it actually does more harm than good. So it has the capacity to see and recognize and give credence to this parallel that is authentically there, but that the credence given to validate, or like the benefit from validating this authentic parallel, is more costly than it is to hold a hard line and say, that's just not how it is. Get that idea out of your head. Like, it doesn't serve you. And that's like an arguable position, but it's an arguable position. It's hardly distorting a distortion to fit a narrative. Like, no, I'll read John's comment.